Link TV presents Mosaic World News from the Middle East. Here are today's top stories.
Deadly suicide attack on Yemeni capital leaves 90 soldiers dead. 2 Lebanese killed in heavy clashes as Syrian conflict spills over. And NATO agrees to hand over security lead to Afghan troops by mid-2013. Mosaic World News from the Middle East begins now.
البداية من اليمن حيث أصدر الرئيس اليمني عبد رب منصور
Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi issued a decision to dismiss the head of Yemen's Central Security, Abdul Malik al-Tayeb, and replace him with Fadl al-Kawzi. Hadi is expected to dismiss a number of military and security leaders within the next several hours, as nearly 90 people were killed and hundreds were wounded in a suicide bombing that targeted the Central Security's headquarters in Al Sabayin area of the capital, Sana'a.
A massive bombing targeted a military brigade of the Yemeni Central Security during its preparatory training for the military parade scheduled for Tuesday to mark the 22nd anniversary of Yemen's National Unity Day. The blast, which took place in Al Sabin Street of Sana'a, caused dozens of casualties among the soldiers. The defense minister and the chief of staff were present at the training were not wounded. Some sources said the bombing was a suicide mission, but other sources said it was caused by explosive devices.
This bombing happens right before the first national holiday with the new president. This specifically indicates that many parties are trying to send a message to Abdrabbu Mansour that there are still other forces controlling the scenes in Yemen.
The preparation for the military parade, which President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi was going to attend, was the first of its kind. The Central Security Units, the 1st Armored Division, the Republican Guard, and all military and security units participated for the first time since the Yemeni Revolution erupted last year, causing rifts in the Yemeni army.
I still don't have a very clear picture of what happened, but this was a tragic accident. It is not fair that one person kills this large number of his fellow soldiers.
The incident may reinforce the idea of division within the army, but at the same time, it illuminates the need to unite the army, which observers believe will remain the target for penetration and fragmentations if it does not become united soon. The incident may cast shadows on Yemen's transitional phase and political process in light of the continual division of the army, which has led to a noticeable security vacuum.
A cautious calm returned this morning to the Lebanese capital, Beirut, following overnight armed clashes that erupted between supporters and opponents of the Syrian regime. 2 people were killed and 18 others were wounded in the clashes. Tension is rising across various Lebanese regions following the death of a religious cleric by the army in the northern Lebanese region of Akkar. In response, several political groups called for a truce and warned against what they described as acts of sectarian strife. Iliam Shatri reports from Beirut.
A cautious calm is dominating the Tariq Jadida district in the Lebanese capital after a night full of clashes that ended with the Lebanese army's deployment. The district of Beirut woke up this morning to scenes of destruction, property damage, and casualties amid chaos and fear of renewed tensions.
Unfortunately, there's no more talk. What you see here on the ground is what you get.
There's tension on the ground, but we need to believe that we can end this tension.
A good citizen is a citizen who remains calm. However, there will come a time when he has to break his silence.
As for the night in Beirut, this is how it appeared. Armed confrontations erupted between supporters and opponents of the Syrian regime. The angry crowd closed city streets with burning tires and barriers in protest over the killing of a religious cleric and his companion at a Lebanese army's checkpoint in the northern Akkar region. The incident sparked a wave of indignation and tension across various Lebanese regions. In response, several political leaders called for self-restraint in a bid to avert dragging the country into strife. This is the first time in a long time that both sides of the Lebanese conflict agree on the importance of restoring calm and upholding civil peace. However, it remains to be seen whether the tense streets will respond to the call issued by its leadership, especially amid the unfolding developments in Syria, which Lebanon is trying to distance itself from.
It's not in any Lebanese group's interest to see a civil war in the country. Unfortunately, the Lebanese front is being infiltrated by foreign intelligence. Perhaps certain foreign groups may benefit from dragging Lebanon into strife. There is a reason to point the finger abroad. The leadership is keen to solve this problem.
From Tripoli, which is still healing from its wounds, to Akkar, where confrontations erupted in the Tariq Jadida district, Lebanon is facing the challenge of managing to distance itself from the developments in Syria. Is there a plot to drag Lebanon into chaos? Many questions are being raised, and the answers to these questions hinge on the unfolding developments on the ground. From Tariq Jadida, Iliam Shatri, Dubai TV, Beirut.
North Lebanon was not much different. Today, the residents of Akkar will hold a funeral procession for religious cleric Sheikh Ahmed Abed Awad and his companion Mohammed Al-Mirib, who were killed yesterday at a Lebanese army checkpoint. A general strike and a state of tension are dominating the northern Lebanese region, despite the call for truce by several members of the government in opposition. The army said it launched an investigation into the incident. In response, the residents rejected the army's intervention in the case. On the ground, the army was able to reopen the streets in Tripoli, Akkar, Al-Bika, and the coastal road connecting Beirut with the south, which protesters blocked with burning tires.
NATO leaders announced today that they will hand over security operations to Afghan forces by mid-2013. Meanwhile, the Afghans expressed their readiness to take over security and military responsibilities after more than a decade of having the presence of Western forces in their country. At a summit in Chicago, NATO leaders announced the launch of the first phase of defensive missile shield to protect Europe from missile attacks from the Middle East, especially Iran.
At the Chicago summit, the NATO leaders announced their readiness to transfer the military leadership in Afghanistan to Kabul's government by mid-2013. A day after that, Afghan officials and citizens expressed their eagerness for their forces to take over security operations in the country, which has witnessed years of chaos and violence. A military commander affirmed his forces' readiness to protect the country and maintain its security.
The Afghan army and other Afghan forces are ready to take on security operations in our country. We are grateful for the assistance from the international community, but we do not lament taking over security operations. It is our duty to lead the mission.
A government official spoke of the most significant challenges that Kabul's authorities are facing after the international forces leave Afghanistan.
The main challenges are our equipment and, of course, training. We need to focus on and invest in training security forces, while acknowledging the international community's commitment to providing equipment to the Afghan security forces. That should be done in accordance with the plan that was drawn up within the framework of the transitional process. This makes us confident, not only as Afghans, but also as part of the international community, that we will be able to take up more responsibility.
As for Afghan citizens, they indicated that the main problem their country is facing pertains to improving living conditions in order to prevent fresh violence. They stressed the importance of the international community's continual support for their government.
If the international community paid attention to our economic situation and made efforts to improve it, no one would resort to using violence to destabilize our country. The problem here is the economy.
We are happy that the Chicago summit supported the Afghan government and showed the world that Afghanistan is not alone and that NATO will not leave Afghanistan to be on its own.
Even though the Afghan security forces consist of 330,000 members, they still need support in terms of intelligence, aerial forces, and logistics. Their mission will not be easy when NATO's 130,000 military members leave the country, as Afghanistan is still enduring recurrent attacks from the Taliban.
The Syrian Revolution General Commission said 13 people were killed today in various Syrian areas, 4 in Homs, 4 in Hama, and a woman in Daraa. The Al-Khalidiyya neighborhood of Homs was intensely shelled, and regime forces stormed the town of Qasun on the west coast. Meanwhile, the town of Qarnaz in the countryside of Hama witnessed a general strike in protest of the military operations carried out by the regime's army in Hama and its countryside. Al-Suqariya town in the countryside of Idlib witnessed an anti-regime demonstration as well. This comes as international observers continue to visit a number of Syrian cities, one day after an explosive device was detonated near cars, carrying a number of UN observers near the town of Duma in the countryside of Damascus.
Demonstrations calling for toppling the regime are continuing in Bahrain, while security forces burned residential homes in the village of Ma'amir. On the other hand, political and rights activists called for a sit-in in front of the UN headquarters in Geneva, which was holding a session designated for discussing human rights, and on its agenda was the case of human rights violations in Bahrain.
Bahrain, an island where the dark night and the suffocating smell of toxic gas fill its cities. All that can be heard are the screams of its residents and gunfire mixed with cries. People who do not know calm. Every morning has its own slogan, and protesters calling for peaceful demonstrations on the week of rejecting the U.S. arming of the regime and solidarity with the wanted and the fugitives. These calls were answered in various cities and villages in Bahrain, and demonstrations emerged. In one of its countless violations, Bahraini security forces burnt a house in the village of Ma'amir by firing poisonous and petrol bombs on the homes of the residents of the area as a punishment for participating in a demonstration only to demand their rights. In a new crackdown on the freedom of expression, Ahmed Reda, a media figure, tortured by police officer Issa Majali to force him to confess to publishing false news and participating in anti-regime demonstrations. The Interior Ministry is refusing to allow his family and lawyers to visit him for fear of seeing the signs of torture on him. Meanwhile, the case of the Bahraini regime's violations against the people was being viewed by the UN Human Rights Council. 100 different human rights organizations worldwide called for an end to the assault on the freedom of expression and the release of all rights and online activists. They also called on the UN Human Rights Council and all relevant governments to use their influence on the ruling Al Khalifa family to end its violations of these rights.
The participating countries in the session to review the human rights case in Bahrain directed sharp criticisms at the Al-Manama government due to the violations and crimes it committed against its people. And throughout the session that was held in Geneva, the Bahraini government delegation seemed fully aware of the continuing violations, but was not able to respond to the condemnations and criticisms directed to them by participating countries. The delegation was subject to precise and clear questions regarding violations and international obligations, and for not implementing the recommendations of the Fact-Finding Commission. However, the official answers of the Bahraini delegation were not spared of untruths.
NATO leaders are urging Pakistan to reopen a key supply route into Afghanistan. In a declaration at the NATO summit, the alliance asked Pakistan to open the supply route as soon as possible. NATO's Secretary General had threatened to leave Pakistan out of the summit if the supply lines remained closed. Islamabad shut key supply routes for the US-led forces in Afghanistan back in November following a deadly American attack on its military personnel. Washington has turned down Islamabad's request for an apology over the November attack. Meanwhile, preventing the leakage of information. This is promised by the head of the UN atomic body after leaked information led to the death of several Iranian scientists.
IAEA has some other scheme to protect the information, and I am doing everything to protect the confidential information. The case of assassination that you raised, I feel deep sympathy as a person and as a human being for the widow. But IAEA is not involved in this assassination at all. I am against the violence.
Iran has accused the IAEA of disclosing the names of its scientists in one of its reports. Those scientists were killed in terrorist attacks. Amano has held talks with the Secretary of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, Saeed Jalili, in Tehran. The IAEA chief says the talks were extensive and held in a good atmosphere. Jalili described the talks as positive and constructive. He said emphasis was placed on the disarmament of countries possessing atomic bombs, as well as peaceful use of nuclear energy. He also met with the head of the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Faridun Abbasi. Amano is in Tehran on a one-day visit. A new video shows Israeli settlers shooting at Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, but that is not rather the most shocking part. Just watch. Well, those are in fact Israeli soldiers you see standing around the shooters. The settlers are armed with a pistol and an M16 military-grade assault rifle. Other settlers involved reportedly threw stones at the Palestinians, and the Israeli soldiers just standing by and watching. A 24-year-old Palestinian was injured in the shooting. 5 others were also wounded by rock-throwing settlers. The incident took place in the Asira al-Qibliya near the Nablus area. The footage was released by Human Rights Watch B'Tselem.
We open in Jerusalem, where the nation today celebrated Jerusalem Day, with the cabinet holding a special session attended by Mayor Nir Barkat on the 1967 battlefield of Ammunition Hill. The main subject of the session was the influx of migrant workers into the country. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there must be a national campaign to prevent illegal infiltrators from entering the country. Here with details, IBA's Ellie Walklanter. Good evening, Ellie.
Good evening. Thank you, Yochanan. Addressing the cabinet meeting this morning, being held on Ammunition Hill to mark 45 years since the city's liberation, Prime Minister Netanyahu warned that Israel could be swamped by illegal migrants from Africa and that the influx is threatening the fabric of Israeli society, its national security, and its national identity. If we don't stop their entry, he said, the problem that currently stands at 60,000 could grow to 600,000, and that threatens our existence as a Jewish and democratic state. The issue of growing numbers of migrants has become high on the national agenda. In recent weeks, residents of South Tel Aviv have slammed the government over a series of crimes, including rapes, perpetrated by Eritrean and Sudanese migrants. Interior Minister Eli Yishai weighed in on the issue in response to recent comments made by Police Commissioner Yochanan Danino and Internal Security Minister Yitzhak Aharonovich that the solution is to provide jobs to the migrants. Said Yishai, those who believe that it would help them if we give them jobs are wrong, because it would entrench them here even more. Netanyahu said his government was working on curbing the flow of illegals coming into the country, a problem which he said began more than 7 years ago. He cited the erection of the fence along the border with Egypt, which is scheduled to be completed by October. And in honor of Jerusalem Day, the government authorized a plan that would encourage the economic development of the capital with an emphasis on tourism. The effort will be funded by a 350 million shekel grant to be used over the next 6 years to develop tourism sites and encourage the construction of hotels and infrastructure for tourism. In addition, the government authorized a plan whereby homes would be built for police officers and career IDF soldiers with land provided by the Israel Lands Administration for the project. Yochanan?
All right, thanks, Ellie, for that report. Israelis from all over the country were in the capital today in celebration of the 45th Jerusalem Day, an annual commemoration of the reunification of the city under Israeli control in 1967. We go live now to IBA's Eyal Reshef, who is standing by at Ammunition Hill with the latest on Jerusalem Day celebrations. Good evening, Ariel, and you are on the ground in a spot where history was made.
That's right, Yochanan. Here at Ammunition Hill, it was the fiercest battle over Jerusalem during the 1967 war. Today, Israeli leaders from across the political spectrum, including the president and the prime minister, as well as many beloved Israeli performers, will grace the stage behind me to pay tribute to those who fought to reunify this city. After a massive buildup of Arab forces and threats to wipe out the Jewish state, on June 5, 1967, Israel launched a surprise attack on the Egyptian Air Force. The move dealt a critical blow to Egypt's military and later to Arab morale. In a war that lasted only 6 days, Israel managed to defeat the armies of 3 formidable Arab nations, Egypt, Syria, and Jordan. Here in Jerusalem, Ammunition Hill, then under Jordanian control, was the setting of the most pivotal battle for the city. In the early morning hours of June 6, Israel launched an assault on the Jordanian stronghold. The fighting lasted 4 hours. 36 Israeli paratroopers and over 70 Jordanian soldiers were killed. In the end, Israel conquered the strategic outpost from Jordan, a turning point in the conquest of Jerusalem, and the march was on to the Old City. The next day, Israeli forces stormed the ancient quarters, eventually bringing the Western Wall under Jewish control for the first time in 2,000 years. The chief rabbis of Israel deemed Jerusalem Day a minor religious holiday, and each year millions of Israelis mark it with major festivities.
In occupied Jerusalem, Prime Minister Salam Fayyad and a number of officials inaugurated the reopening of the Palestinian Heritage Museum in Daraa al-Tifel al-Arabi organization, or Children's House. The museum exhibits relics of the Ottoman manuscripts, which proves the presence of Jerusalemites in the holy city of Jerusalem at the time.
With cooperation from local Arab, Islamic, and Italian organizations, Daraa al-Tifel al-Arabi inaugurated the reopening of the Palestinian Heritage Museum in Jerusalem. Prime Minister Salam Fayyad and a number of community leaders of the holy city of Jerusalem attended the ceremony.
The organization recounts the rich history of the Deir Yassin village, when the Palestinian villages were deserted due to the Nakba, or catastrophe, of 1948. That was extremely difficult for us. We worked very hard on this subject, and the result was great, thank God. God willing, we have accomplished something very good for the Palestinians and the Jerusalemites.
I believe this museum expresses the real resistance against the occupation. It is a form of resistance against the occupation's campaigns and practices. It helps preserve the identity of the land and our Palestinian heritage, especially in Jerusalem. I salute this pioneering organization and its founders who helped launch such an initiative. It's an accomplishment with great importance and value.
The Palestinian Heritage Museum was established by Hind al-Husseini in 1962 because it was necessary to introduce the Palestinian people's historical legacy to the outside world. But the obstacles imposed by Israel prevented it from developing. After a full process of restoration and architectural modernization over the past few years, the museum and its various exhibit halls have been renovated and are prepared to redisplay the valuable historical relics that stemmed from the Jerusalem civilization.
We put this culture on display because it is very important for the generations to be proud of their history, to appreciate it, and to know that Jerusalem is theirs. Jerusalem is theirs with all its details, in every yarn, every brick, every rock, and every picture on these walls. This organization is still in its infanthood.
In the celebration held today, we saw a very enthusiastic crowd. They were very impressed by the items that we put on display. This makes me very happy and makes me feel that my hard work didn't go in vain. Everything comes with a price. It's true that I worked very hard on this, but the result was pleasant. It proves to the entire world that we have been here for hundreds of years. This building is more than 200 years old. Who built it? Its owners. The administration building is 150 years old. Therefore, we have been here in this country for many decades, not today or 10 years ago.
The museum houses exhibition halls that present an authentic and rich history, including a showroom for textile spinning and weaving, a room for traditional attire and jewelry, and a hall for manuscripts and documents from the Ottoman era. These relics reinforce the deep-rooted Palestinian civilization in Palestine generally, but particularly in Jerusalem. In light of Israel's defacement attempts, culture still thrives in Jerusalem, adorned with a civilization that remains shining and prospering among the cities. Sarwa Shakra, Palestinian TV, occupied Jerusalem.
The views expressed on Mosaic are from contributing broadcasters, not Link TV or its sponsors. The production of Mosaic is made possible by grants from the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, the Wincoat Foundation, the Firedoll Foundation, and by support of viewers like you. Thank you. Watch Mosaic World News online. Stay up to date with breaking news, read our blog, get transcripts of past shows, and more at linktv.org/mosaic. Airwaves, a global channel of uncompromising stories, world news, documentaries, entertainment, and culture. Link TV, connecting you to the world. For more information, visit linktv.org.